Welcome back to my channel. This will be my final draft for Fantasy Premier League, and very soon I'll be delving into my team selection and locking in my final squad during the first deadline stream of this season on the 15th of August in the UK, around 2 hours before the deadline. Be sure not to miss it by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and also hitting that notification bell so you're always up to date with my content, whether it's for FPL or UCL Fantasy. On screen, you can see Digne's stats, so I have corrected them from a previous podcast I made in the players to avoid video. So he had 0 goals and 5 assists. The other stats were accurate, but not those ones in terms of goals and assists. So now you have the full picture with Digne and Malen. Do you think he's going to start in game week 1, and in Morgan Rodgers' potential absence, do you think Malen will lock in that right winger spot, because he didn't get enough game time last season with only 2 starts since joining in January? But there is no Asensio or Marcus Rashford taking those spots, and I think Malen, who has been incredible in pre-season, could have a big part to play, and at 5.5 million, he remains a massive differential with 3% ownership. So I think it was worth mentioning these 2 players, Digne with the updated stats, and Malen, who will be discussed in this video, because I am looking at that sort of price point of 5.5 million with a ball recoverer, or perhaps a more attacking option who's more exciting, like Malen. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, and also check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the championships. Pre-season is always a great time to sign up, because you can get early access days in advance compared to all subscribers and everybody else. There's also my Discord server, FPL League, and Spotify in the description. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. Compared to previous drafts, this will be a different structure which contains 2 of the most expensive players in the game, and in order to facilitate this, I need some cheap enablers like Dubravka, who just signed for Burnley as a 4 million goalkeeper. He will be the only starter, I believe, at that price tag, so he's going to be in everyone's teams as a backup, and his ownership is increasing exponentially. It will soon be 20%, and probably by the time this video is published, it's going to be even higher than that. So I think Dubravka is a great replacement for Petrovic, who faces Liverpool away in game week 1 regardless, and Bournemouth have had a few shaky moments in pre-season. Despite some early victories, they were still conceding a lot of goals. And Burnley, they were really solid defensively last season, but they have lost a lot of key players like Brownhill in the midfield, Trafford in goal. But I think Dubravka, with that Premier League experience, playing at Hull City and Newcastle, I think he could be a great shot stopper, get some bonus points from time to time. Tottenham away in game week 1 doesn't look great, but I think long term he could be decent and occasionally start for you in your FPL team. So he's a great pickup at 4 million. And defensively, I am considering many different options. That includes Tarkowski, who is a defensive contribution machine, just like Murillo, and it all depends on which team you're kind of backing defensively. But Everton have good fixtures over the first 4 game weeks. If you look a bit medium to long term, I think Forest have superior fixtures overall, and defensively last season they were amongst the very best in the division. But you can't go wrong with Murillo or Tarkowski, and maybe in my team selection or deadline stream I'll have both of them at the same time. But for 0.5 million more, you can have Gyökeres and Frimpong with their attacking potential, even Nate Nuri as well, if you can start consistently for Man City. The Arsenal defenders like Saliba and Gabriel, who can get the occasional goal, especially Gabriel from set pieces, bonus points, and many clean sheets. And then you've got other options at around 5.5 million. But of course, Cucurella could be of great interest with Chelsea's opening fixtures, and a lot of them have been in my previous drafts already. But I think Tarkowski could be a very decent choice and the best way of covering Everton defensively, even over Jordan Pickford at the same price tag, who is still under consideration for me, but I have gone about it a little bit differently so I can afford the Chelsea defensive coverage and also Everton through Tarkowski. Now, the highlight midfielder transfer is a little bit different. I'm going from one teammate to another. Florian Wirtz offers great value at 8.5 million and can play multiple roles for Liverpool, but Cody Gakpo has been the star of pre-season with multiple goals for the Reds, and I think he will be the starting left winger to kickstart this season. That could change over time if Liverpool make another big signing, either as a left winger to replace Luis Diaz directly, or another top quality striker like Alexander Isak, which would then push Ekitike to the wing. So I think Gakpo could be a short-lived punt, but he is still worth it with a low ownership and a decent price tag. It also helps me build a solid 15-man squad that contains Haaland and Mohamed Salah, and that's why I'm quite keen on the likes of Cody Gakpo and another 7.5 million midfielder. But in the forward line, I'm also considering João Pedro again, who was in my earlier drafts, but I would be selling Ollie Watkins, who is one of the most informed strikers in the Premier League right now. He has scored in 4 consecutive friendlies at the time of this recording, and I'll break down all the results throughout pre-season in an updated lineups podcast, so be sure to check it out, and also all my other videos and live streams that are headed your way. It will be tough letting go of Ollie Watkins, and he might still find his way into my final squad, but João Pedro is a good replacement for him. Chelsea haven't really had a pre-season. They're going to have 2 friendlies, I believe, in the space of a few hours and trying out different players, but they've had a long break from the Club World Cup, so there's a possibility of rust and maybe being caught out cold against the likes of Crystal Palace, who have been on form throughout pre-season. So that could be a bit of a difficult one, and maybe doubling or tripling up on Chelsea could be a risk actually, despite the fact that their fixtures are also really appealing. Aston Villa are top of the fixture difficulty rating, the FDR, for the first 8 game weeks, and Chelsea are top over the first 6. So I think both of them are certainly worth the investment. You might even want to have Watkins and João Pedro simultaneously, but what does that mean about having Haaland and Salah at the same time? So it's impossible to have the perfect squad. You've got to make some sacrifices somewhere down the line, but these two will be amongst the very best forwards in FPL. Ollie Watkins in isolation is better, but he does cost 1.5 million more, and it's all about balance and finding the right structure for your FPL squads. So with all of that in mind, this is my final draft for Fantasy Premier League, and Robert Sanchez returns to my team once more between the sticks. I'm also considering Sells at the same price tag, who might be better in isolation, but then you compare Chelsea's fixtures to Nottingham Forest. Whilst both of them are good, you would back Chelsea a little bit more. But what about that question mark of pre-season? I think there is still a lot of question marks around Chelsea with that month break since winning the Club World Cup. But facing Crystal Palace at home in Game Week 1, my current prediction is 1-0 Chelsea, so I think Sanchez could be a decent punt for Game Week 1 anyway. But with a goalkeeper, you want a set and forget option. That's where Raya and Pickford could come in at 5.5 million. I'm not considering Alisson. He gets injured way too much for a goalkeeper, and Trafford and Edison is going to be a huge headache, just like most Man City players. Once we see an established first choice goalkeeper for Man City, then it might be worth investment, particularly if it's Trafford at 5 million. Then you've got the 4.5 million options like Kelleher, who I discussed in a previous draft. But right now I'm settling for Robert Sanchez, who is ranked quite highly in my best goalkeepers video in the top 5, and you could arguably put him in the podium. With my defensive line, I've got Wan-Bissaka, Nico Williams and Tarkowski, and I think Williams could be quite underrated in terms of defensive contributions. He makes so many tackles for a fullback, and Wan-Bissaka is the same with him, of course. That's his best strength, but he did get a lot of goals and assists last season, considering his record and also his deficiencies on the ball and going forwards. But for West Ham, he got plenty of fantasy assists, a couple of goals here and there, and Tarkowski is one of the very best when it comes to defensive contribution points. It's also worth noting a few ACL injuries, so Levi Colwill and James Maddison will miss most of this season with an ACL injury, and hopefully they recover even sooner, and that could also have an impact on Chelsea defensively. But I think Hato will be the starting left centre-back alongside Chalobah, but then there's also Tosin Adarabioyo and Badiashile who could also partner him. But I think the first choice centre-back partnership for Chelsea will be Hato and Chalobah at this moment in time. So let's see if that works fairly well for Chelsea, and Robert Sanchez can keep plenty of clean sheets in the process. But when you look at these fixtures, I think Sunderland away for West Ham does stand out, but I'm not really backing any clean sheets for my entire defensive line except Robert Sanchez. So if you check out my recent videos, you would have seen the predictions, and you'll also see it once more during the deadline stream with the top 10 captaincy options, the clean sheet odds, you name it. But I do like this defensive line long term with the fixtures in mind, the defensive contribution potential, and the odd goals and assists you can get from these cheaper options, especially like Wan-Bissaka at 4.5 million. Tarkowski is now a premium, of course, like most Everton defenders. My midfield comprises of just an entire set in terms of the starting 11. So Salah and Gakpo will be that really solid double up in the Liverpool midfield. I've got Daniel Malen as a very big punt at 5.5 million. But if I want to play it safer, Elliot Anderson would take his place, maybe even Moises Caicedo or another ball recoverer. And very recently, I had Reinders in my draft. He can get goals, assists, and defensive contribution points all in one. He scored 10 times in Serie A last season, but Daniel Malen scored twice in pre-season and got multiple assists. So I'm really intrigued by him especially if Rodgers is injured in the medium to long term. His injuries seem quite serious. He went straight down the tunnel as covered in a recent podcast. And Eze hasn't been discussed too much. His ownership is just under 10%, but I think he's a nice differential. Not the biggest you'll ever see because I still think a lot of people have him in their teams compared to Malen, for example. But I think Eze has that high ceiling. I started last season with him. He was quite underwhelming. He was very unlucky in Gameweek 1 with that free kick goal against Brentford being disallowed. He scored against Chelsea, I think, in Gameweek 2, and he got a massive haul at Stamford Bridge, and that's his fixture, of course, in Gameweek 1 this season, assuming he stays at Crystal Palace. But Eze can get goals and assists, even from outside the box, the bonus points. He's a talismanic figure for Crystal Palace, and he takes a lot of set pieces, as covered in my Predicted Lineups podcast. And the final midfielder is Digne, who is on penalties for Everton, and he got 0 assists last season and 9 goals, but I think he can get double digits in terms of goals and a couple of assists this time round to get even more bonus points and be one of the best midfielders at this price tag and below. So I have sort of a few players like Gyökeres, for example, and Mitoma, who are still under consideration, but I'm less keen on them, especially in the case of Gyökeres. And I think Tottenham Hotspur, of course, they were battered by Bayern Munich 4-0 in a recent preseason friendly, but the 3-day gap between the UEFA Super Cup final against Paris Saint-Germain and the fixture against Burnley is enough to put you off most Tottenham assets, even in the midfield and attacking line. Dominic Solanke hasn't featured in pre-season whatsoever up until this point. But in my forward line, I've got Joao Pedro and Erling Haaland, and both of them have featured at the same time in a recent draft, but not with Mohamed Salah also in my setup. So I do like this attack. It looks really solid. The only question mark would be Malen and his minutes moving forward, but that's where defensive depth could be really important, and sometimes I could play a 4-4-2, but I am limited in my forward line, you could say, because my third option is a 4.5 million budget enabler who's going to sit on my bench more often than not, and if needed, he will come in every now and then, but ideally that wouldn't be the case. Erling Haaland is right up there amongst the best captaincy options against Wolves away. Would you rank him higher than Salah to start this season? That's one of the big debates, and I think most people will either pick Salah or Haaland, and at the moment it seems like most people are gravitating towards Mohamed Salah, the most template player in the game right now with the ownership and the most expensive at 14.5 million. But I do have that Chelsea attacker here in Joao Pedro facing Crystal Palace at home. I think he will start for the Blues, and Delap will be ready, waiting in line on the bench if needed, and Chelsea could rotate quite heavily in their attack, with the exception, of course, of Cole Palmer. On my bench, I've got some decent options like Dubravka, a 4 million starting goalkeeper for Burnley, and because of that, I have changed Estev to Reinildo because I don't want to double up on Burnley defensively, even though they'll mainly sit on my bench. So that's why I've gone for Reinildo, who has superior fixtures, of course. Sunderland have the very best in terms of the newly promoted clubs, and I have made a video specifically focusing on Sunderland, Leeds United and Burnley. So by watching all those videos, you'll be well prepared for Gameweek 1 and the rest of the season. My other players on the bench include Mark Guiu, a new signing for Sunderland. He faces West Ham at home, of course, but I would prioritise Wan-Bissaka in the starting 11. And my other player is Konsa, facing Newcastle at home, and Aston Villa are top of the FDR for the first 8 game weeks. So I think having 2 Aston Villa players is reasonable. Ollie Watkins is the best in isolation. Morgan Rogers, if fit, would be second. But Malen is a nice offensive punt, and I think Konsa is the best way of covering the villains defensively. Let's talk about the captaincy though. The huge debate of Salah versus Haaland. I do lean towards Salah with the captaincy, and Haaland is a very close second. I just think the midfielder advantage plays a big part. I've talked about this before. The extra point for scoring a goal and keeping a clean sheet, and Salah has a tremendous Gameweek 1 record. But let's not forget as well the way Erling Haaland started last season. He scored at Stamford Bridge in a 2-0 win for Man City, and then scored braces and hat-tricks for fun up until Gameweek 6, when we started to see a drop-off both in Man City and Erling Haaland, and the injury to Rodri played a huge part. But if Rodri can be available from the get-go, I think that'll be massive for Man City, and it could make Erling Haaland an even better FPL asset. Let's discuss some prices very quickly and also expected points before delving into a few other aspects of my team. So Robert Sanchez costs 5 million and Dubravka costs 4 million. So it's a decent amount spent on goalkeepers at 9 million overall. Wan-Bissaka, of course, is 4.5. The same goes for Konsa. I've got a 4 million defender in Reinildo. Tarkowski's 5.5, and Nico Williams comes in at 5 million. But you might point towards the lack of Arsenal, Liverpool and Chelsea defenders. But of course, Robert Sanchez does kind of counteract that, in my opinion, with the Chelsea one anyway, but you could definitely make a case for Arsenal or Liverpool, who have two of the best defences and teams in the Premier League. In the midfield, Salah is 14.5 million, and Haaland, of course, is the second most expensive player in the game at 14 million, but I can still build a solid 50-man squad, as you can see, with both of them coexisting at the same time. Gakpo costs 7.5 million, the same goes for Eze. Ndiaye offers good value at 6.5 million, and Daniel Malen could be a steal for the first 3 to 4 game weeks anyway at 5.5. Joao Pedro is also very enticing and template with around 52% ownership. He costs 7.5 million. I've also got Mark Guiu, a budget enabler at 4.5. So as you can see, I do have quite a few enablers to really build this foundation for Salah and Haaland at the same time, and I do have that luxury of the captaincy. So in Game Week 2, when Liverpool face Newcastle away, I could then turn my attention towards Man City facing Tottenham at home with Erling Haaland as the standout captaincy option. But there's also Cole Palmer, Bukayo Saka. There are a lot of good options out there. Alexander Isak, whether he stays at Newcastle or joins Liverpool. But Salah and Haaland, you don't get any better than them. There's a reason why they're the most expensive players in the game, and the expected points reflects that. And these stats are taken by the website Fantasy Football Hub. So Robert Sanchez has an expected points figure of 4. And the same goes for my defensive line with Wan-Bissaka, Williams and Tarkowski, all just above that threshold. Salah has 8.2, so it has gone up since my previous draft, which I made a couple of days ago. Gakpo comes in at 5.7, which is very appealing actually. And Daniel Malen is very low at 1.3. Eze is also quite high at around 4.4. And Ndiaye is even better at 5.2. Joao Pedro has 5, and Erling Haaland has 6.8. He's my vice captain, and Salah takes the armband. On my bench, there have been some big changes with some of these budget players after their moves are finalised. So Dubravka is at 3.1, facing Tottenham away. Mark Guiu has 3.2, facing West Ham. Konsa has 3.1, and Reinildo Mandava, who is last on my bench, has 3.4. So based on that, Fantasy Football Hub recommends starting any of those players on my bench over Daniel Malen. As always, let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Would you start one of those bench options over Daniel Malen, or just pick a different 5-point family midfielder like Elliot Anderson, Caicedo or Reinders, who can get goal contributions in the case of the Dutchman, and also defensive contributions, which is so important in Fantasy Premier League this season. Before the season starts, make sure you use websites like fpl.team so you can visualize future game weeks, and then you can be satisfied with how your team looks like in terms of fixtures and also the structure in Game Weeks 2 and beyond. And the same goes for chip strategy. If you want to see a chip strategy podcast, then let me know down in the comment section below. We don't have too much information about doubles and blanks, but there is a general idea of when they'll be after Game Week 30. So I can discuss the best time to use every single chip, especially with the double boosters we have now. So 2 bench boosts, 2 triple captains, 3 hits, and wildcards, which has always been the case to be fair. So on screen, you can see my Game Week 2 provisional team with Dubravka in goal, facing Sunderland at home, and Robert Sanchez is on the bench facing West Ham away. The defensive line comprised of Nico Williams, Tarkowski, and Reinildo Mandava this time, facing Burnley away. Both Gakpo and Salah are away to Newcastle, and I've also doubled up on the other side of Merseyside in Everton, who both face Brighton at home, so Ndiaye would be my attacking option there. And Eze could be a problem. As much as I like him as a player and the long-term fixtures aren't too shabby for Crystal Palace, he does have a lot of clashes, like against Robert Sanchez in Game Week 1. In Game Week 2 here, he's facing Nico Williams, who's in my starting 11. And in Game Week 3, this pattern repeats itself. Daniel Malen is also in this midfield, facing Brentford away. Erling Haaland is my provisional Game Week 2 captain, facing Tottenham at home. And Joao Pedro faces West Ham away. The rest of my 15-man squad includes Mark Guiu facing Burnley away from home. Konsa has that Brentford fixture, and Wan-Bissaka faces Chelsea. So that's another clash there with Joao Pedro, and I would be backing Chelsea in that fixture. So going into Game Week 3, as you can see, the same issue with Konsa facing Eze. That sort of clash really puts me off. I've got Sanchez at home to Fulham, Nico Williams facing West Ham at home, Tarkowski and Ndiaye facing Wolves away. Both Gakpo and Salah face Arsenal at home. Daniel Malen, of course, has Crystal Palace too. Erling Haaland could be my vice-captain on this occasion, facing Brighton away. And Joao Pedro faces Fulham at home. I've also got Wan-Bissaka on my bench, so there is a little clash, I think, between Forest and West Ham, but a 0-0 would be perfect in that sort of scenario if I started Wan-Bissaka as well. Both Mark Guiu and Reinildo Mandava would face Brentford at home, and Dubravka faces Man United. He would be my backup goalkeeper, and more often than not, I'd be starting Robert Sanchez, of course. But that is kind of the good thing about FPL.team. You can pick out holes in your squad in terms of clashes, fixtures. You can then compare chip strategies and different drafts. So that's why it's really useful using a website like FPL.team. Be sure to do it if you haven't done so already, and I promise you it will really help in terms of FPL planning. And I will be using websites like this for a rating your teams video, for example. If you want to see it, let me know down in the comment section below. Show support to the video and also to the channel as we close in on 34,000 subscribers. That wraps it up for the final draft in FPL. Very soon you'll be seeing my team selection, and before you know it, I'll be going live for the first deadline stream of the season on the 15th of August, around 2 hours before the deadline. Another player I sold from a previous draft was Victor Gyökeres, and I still think he has a quality FPL option and he should be considered at that price tag, but I would favour Ollie Watkins even more to start the season anyway, at 9 million, and Arsenal's opening fixtures are terrible, but that's where a Gameweek 2 free hit could come into play, where you can triple up on Arsenal against Leeds at home, and Gyökeres could be your captain, because otherwise I'd be favouring Haaland, Watkins, Joao Pedro and other forwards to start this season anyway. Things do change very quickly though, and if Arsenal can get their act together in Gameweek 1, then there could be some regrets, of course, about avoiding teams like Arsenal because of the fixtures. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it insightful, then like this video, subscribe to my channel, and click the notification bell so you're always up to date with my content, whether it's for FPL or UCL Fantasy, which returns this month. Follow me on X, Instagram, Blue Sky, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description for my Patreon on the championships, further links to my videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, FPL League and Spotify can also be found in the description. I'll see you very soon for even more preseason content, and keep your eyes peeled for the Gameweek 1 deadline stream.